And I'm going to be awkwardly checking my phone for my notes because that's the best solution I have. Okay, give myself a bit of a breather to remember how I was doing an introduction. Still getting used to this. Hello and welcome back to Filmmakers Blend podcast. I am joined today by Patrick Rieth of Devon House Creative. I am your host, Adam K. Allen. I'm very glad to have Patrick here. Patrick is another fellow Ball State alumni. He actually majored in animation, however, at Ball State. He cut his teeth doing freelance motion design after graduating, and now lives in Indianapolis, where he spent the last 3 years working as the creative director for Devon House Creative, a motion design studio he operates in conjunction with his brother Nick and their friend Dan Anderson. When he's not working with Devon House, Patrick enjoys running, biking, and grinding through any FromSoft games. Welcome to the podcast, Patrick Rieth. Patrick, thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's been a while since we've seen each other.
Yeah.
Because we reconnected. I think you reached out to me a year or so ago.
Yeah,
Because we met up for coffee.
Like a year and a half.
Something like that, yeah.
We met up for coffee, and
Yeah,
then
ironically.
I'm glad you reached out. I'm super happy to reconnect. I invited you to like a dinner party once, and I need to have another dinner party.
And I felt
just
bad
been
because every
busy.
time because you asked me like for a game night and then
Yeah.
dinner, and it's like each time I was like, I am already booked.
for sure.
I felt so bad about that. But we definitely need to do that sometime.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I mean, I talked to you a little bit when I invited you to the podcast about, its kind of purpose, which part of it is to talk about, industry happenings or like the process for you and your specific position, but also just for people to get to know you specifically in the market. And so tell me a little bit, what drew you to the media industry to begin with?
For me, it was I went to school for animation, and my brother and I started doing like freelance stuff when we were still in college, and I had thought about moving out west to the West Coast, but I decided that I wanted to stay in the Midwest, and I knew that if I was going to work in the media industry, if I was going to do something that was story driven, it was going to have to do something that was a little bit more on the corporate side, and so that's why I focused on my senior year, like doing motion graphics, and I guess luckily for us that kind of turned into a niche thing that allowed us to get our foot in the door with a few people, because it was a skill that a lot of other marketing companies may have not had or like hired on yet. So we like got to do a bunch of freelance stuff initially. But I'd say I initially went in because I just, had a really deep desire to, I'd say, it's personal, but like initially it was to tell stories. But like, if I'm truly honest, initially, I think a lot of it was actually because I wanted to be perceived as a professional storyteller. Okay. And so, that's been a big transition for me is, now I'm much more of a businessman. I don't know, maybe an artist for hire is the right word, as opposed to like what I would consider like a storyteller or, I guess that's how I found my way into the media industry.
Gotcha. And so what is that? So I don't think I fully understood until I was prepping for this. I didn't understand that your role with Devon House, that you were actually the creative director.
Sure.
I always knew you as an animator. So, is that like a recent change, or is that like something that kind of happened just as Devon House came to be?
That's more of a recent change. And like, truthfully, when we hired on our first like full lead animator, Taylor, we gave him the title of lead animator. And so we were looking at what our titles were, and I was like, I'll be the creative director. Truthfully, most of what I do, I'm still a big kind of like, weapon in our holster for animation, but most of what I do is relationship building and like biz dev really now, or, but as a business owner, you wear a bunch of hats all the time, but that's I think one of the things that I actually enjoy doing, and I've been trying to grow in the last few years.
Gotcha.
So.
Yeah, it's weird how we find ourselves, we have this perceived notion of this is who I am and this is what I should be doing.
Oh, yeah.
And then when you go into business for yourself, or as you have with your brother and friends, you realize I can't just be that by necessity. Yeah. I have to expand and take on multiple roles, and maybe have a different title for myself.
Yeah, and I think there's kind of a beauty in that like when you're subject to what the market needs from you, it means that you have to grow and flex in ways that maybe you wouldn't have if you cordon yourself off, but I mean, there's a big drawback to that too, which is that like you are subject to the market, you're not within somebody else's system. You're having to create all of the bumpers and the constraints for yourself and like figure out what works. So
Yeah. So let me jump back a little bit. So like you said, in college you majored in animation.
Yeah.
But did you remind me or correct me if I'm wrong? Did you do work with doing storyboarding when you were in college first?
Oh yeah, I love storyboarding. Storyboarding is one of my favorite things. It's an interesting storyboarding for motion design versus storyboarding for film or more traditional animation are very different. Like I love traditional film and animation storyboarding, and growing as a motion designer storyboard artist has been unique and different because it's much more about simplifying, analogizing, turning everything into metaphor as opposed to doing things like literally, Like take a scene where you're like, if you're trying to talk about creating value for somebody through like a medical product, a lot of times in motion design, you'll have something that it won't necessarily be like, oh, you've got a dot that's traveling through like a vortex of like lattices that changes color and talks about like how different elements of a product. Whereas like if you're storyboarding a chase scene, it's like you're right in the heart of like describing it as like compelling and viscerally as you can. But yeah, so I did storyboarding.
Gotcha. And so, like you said, you got into the industry in general because you wanted to be perceived as a professional storyteller.
Sure.
Why animation? I mean, when there are so many different departments in the industry that can still fall under that category of being a storyteller. Why animation?
Because I was good at drawing when I was in high school. That was because initially I wanted to be a comic book artist.
Okay.
And
didn't you do a comic book for one of the finals in our honors classes?
Probably.
I think
I probably did.
I feel like you did. I feel like I remember that.
Yeah, I probably did.
And I was jealous because I can barely draw a stick figure.
Yeah, I love like especially ink comic art because my brother and I actually we have a congenital eye disease called retinoschisis, which means we both have like, I know it's funny, we're like we make art but we're like visually impaired, but like so like I've always seen the world with a little bit less detail because it's not like something that glasses fix. It's like it's something that's actually in my retina. And so I love like the silhouette and the chiaroscuro of like comic art. And that's always like what my style has been. I saw one of your questions was like, what would be your guilty pleasure project? And it's like definitely something like that's like a really like dripping with detail comic book that I could just spend like 2 years on, because like actually spend a lot of time on, because that's the thing with comic art, it takes forever.
Right.
But yeah, it was because I was an artist, and I knew that Ball State had a pretty good animation program, and I saw that as a way to like specialize into what I was doing because I didn't have much experience with like videography at the time when I went to college. Yeah.
I think that's fair. You were already a good artist. Might as well pursue it.
Sure.
You've made this transition recently, kind of by necessity, of becoming the creative director. Yeah. So, like you said, you're still kind of like the ace up the sleeve when it comes to animation. But what is your day-to-day like as a creative director?
Okay. Well, as a business owner, it's I wouldn't say it's chaos, but I'll give you an example. We have, it's hard to nail down my day-to-day because, like, I'll tell you this, I measure my productivity based off of focus hours that I achieve. So focus hours for me are hours that are not marred by, let's say, meetings or conversations or social media or videos. Yeah. It's just like at the computer doing like actual work. And that's mostly for when I'm in production. But if I get like 5 or 6 of those a day, that's like a really good productive day. Because, stuff like bleeds in, you're like talking to people and all this stuff. Yeah. But like right now I'm in the middle of like, we had a client that had a project come in that was like last minute, and it was like a larger budget than previous, but also like it was like a 3-week, like it was like a 3-week turnaround for like a 2-minute animated video that needed to be like so like I'm like right now like all hands on deck like animation all the time like for that project, whereas maybe a month ago I was probably spending more like 30% of my time in the actual work and like 70% of my time in like communicating with clients, like pitching new clients, meeting with people, like going to events, stuff like that. You know, we do like I try to do stuff on social media. So
Yeah, I've seen like some of your posts on LinkedIn where you've done
yeah.
like the talks and everything. Hi, Pippin. Pippin wants to be involved too. If you don't know Pippin, this is my personal dog and the office dog.
Star of the show.
He is a little attention king. We can't right now, okay? Hop off. Thank you. But no, I've seen some of your. I know I've seen some of your posts from LinkedIn where you've talked about like animation.
Yeah.
I thought it was really cool. I really liked
thanks.
those. Really enjoyed those.
Yeah, thank you.
It's so hard to find that time when you're trying to run the business and also do the work and also network, but then also fulfill social media marketing needs.
Yeah, because I mean, for us at least, social media is always, and the success we've seen with it has been in a form of kind of like non-aggressive follow-up, where it's like it keeps you in front of the important people and keeps you in their mind, letting them know what you do. Because a lot of times, I feel like when we have not gotten work from people, it's been more because of a lack of awareness than like necessarily missing out on bids or something like that. But yeah.
You kind of already talked about this, but like how much animating, like actually doing the creative portion, if you will. Maybe I shouldn't say that because the planning and the conceptualization is still creative.
Yeah, but it's like how much of the like hard labor skill am I doing on it?
Right. Yeah. So like, what's that balance like for you?
Oh,
Because I mean, the actual animation side and the storytelling side, that's your first love, right?
Yeah. Well, you know, it kind of depends. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you, my family's kind of my love right now.
That is fair.
Well, but I wouldn't say that like I'm like, oh, you know, it's obvious. I'd say, you know, 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago, I put a lot of my identity in what I thought I was going to be as a creative, and pursued that.
Yeah.
And to be honest, my wife, and when I had my son, I got way more fulfillment and joy just from the simple and mundane of having, you know, a child. You know, God willing, everybody has access to a child. It's amazing and it's a miracle, but it's not like something where you're like, I'm a director of a big movie. I only one in 800 million people become a director in a movie. It's like I found more joy and fulfillment in that than I ever did in pursuing the creative stuff. So I was like, what, you know, like, is this really the depth of like where I find my joy?
Right.
And so I don't know if that answers your question, but like, but you know, yeah, creativity is evolving for me right now, what it means, and like what pursuing creativity like means for me.
Right. Well, and so how do you balance your personal creative needs and also the creative needs of your business with the producerial or managerial aspects necessary in running a business?
I'd say I was not very good at balancing it for years. I mean, I would say I was consumed by pursuing an outcome, and I wasn't doing it for the love of the art. I was doing it because I wanted to, you know, justify my kind of artistic existence, I'd say. And man, yeah, like that's one thing. Like I was at like a panel for freshmen coming to Luddy for the like arts and sciences or whatever, and I was like, try to separate what you do from who you are, because like I mean, for me, like I don't know if you know this about our business, but for a few years when we kind of started our business, we actually tried doing a YouTube channel for a while. We didn't tout it to many people. We thought we had everything down because we had like a kind of a C-list celebrity that we'd been working for a long time voicing a character. We spent like a couple years, you know, curating like a show that we could produce like on a semi-reasonable basis. But by the time we started like releasing stuff, like it literally took a year to get it off the ground. And by the time it was getting off the ground, like the videos were getting like 15, 20,000 views each time. It had actually morphed so far away from like the original creative vision that we were like, why are we pursuing this? And so like that, to me, like that was super unbalanced. At least for me, it was super unbalanced. And now I'm in a much more balanced place when it comes to how I view creativity.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I feel like now, honestly, I'm in a business where my creativity and what we're doing is kind of like, I'd say almost like I've woken up and I'm like, oh my gosh, this thing is kind of whirring and I have to keep it going. Even though it's like, I started it for different reasons than why I'm running it now.
Yeah, because you've been working at it full time for the last 3 years, but it's been around longer than that.
It's been around for 6.
Yeah.
The first 3, we kind of did 2 things at once. And the analogy I would say is like, I was working 120% of the time, but I was doing 60% on 2 things as opposed to 100% on 1.
Yeah.
And yeah, I feel like as a creative, a lot of life is like this big vortex where like you start with this initial like love, right? This childlike love for a certain element of it. And then you go experience some new level of like illumination or enlightenment that makes you a little cynical about the world. And then eventually you circle back to like your original love with more perspective. And then you do it in wider and wider arcs. And you come back with more and more like perspective and resources to do it like more effectively.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like where you're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea what I was doing back then. And now I have a much better chance of doing it.
It's almost like, do you remember learning the method writing from Berg?
Yeah.
I remember hating that.
Yeah.
I hated it so much. I appreciate it for what it is now. No, it's like, the whole point is to find the purest form of your argument.
Yeah.
But it sounds like the way you're describing it's similar to that of you go through that vortex of here's my childlike love, get new life experience, redefine approach, rinse and repeat until you. I guess the question is, or maybe I shouldn't say question, but do we ever actually find the truest approach? Because life is constantly shifting, so art constantly shifts, and the perspective and approach to art by necessity has to shift.
Yeah, I think being like awake and aware of like who you are and like where you are in the world. I know that sounds kind of like esoteric, right? but not living in fantasies in your head. Right. When you wake up from that, I think you're in like a positive upward spiral as opposed to like kind of like a subterranean spiral.
And we live we live and work in an industry where you have to still have the fantastical, because that drives the creative side of it.
I mean, being in the creative industry, so much is identity driven, right? So many people, like, this is what I told the students, is like so many people get in. The hardest thing I feel like for me to learn was that like so many people start because they're like, I want to recreate the emotions that I felt as a child in other people. Yeah. And that's really, really hard. But I also think a lot of people are disingenuous, and I was disingenuous. It's like what you really want is you want to make something and recreate the childlike feelings you felt in yourself with your own work. And that's like literally impossible. Like when you are close to the work, you will never be able to recreate like the experience you had as a kid. And I at least that was for me. That was like what I was pursuing.
I never thought of it that way, but that makes perfect sense. Because you're so tied to the piece of art that you were creating that you can't get that same reaction because you're so worried about how is the rest of the world, or at least how is my hopeful audience perceiving it. Yeah. So you lose part of that because when you're just enjoying it, you have no tie to it other than I enjoy this. It fills me with joy or happy, whatever the feeling may be. Oh man, I've never thought of it that way.
Yeah, it's like I don't know. That's why I got for me I got into it because of that. Like I definitely have a genuine love for it, but I think initially too I got into it for kind of selfish reasons. For like I want to excel at this and then be known for this as opposed to like provide value for the world. And yeah, man, it's having kids will really change your perspective because it makes you acknowledge, or it made me at least acknowledge like how selfish I was like internally because I had to be selfless like for my son. And then also it was like, if I am getting more fulfillment and joy and like contentment from something that's accessible to everybody, have I been pursuing the wrong thing, right? Like, why have I been pursuing not like being good at my job or like making good art, but pursuing like a specific identity?
No, I feel like we could spend the entirety of the podcast just delving into the, as you said, kind of the esoteric or the philosophical aspect of art.
Yeah. Sorry,
yay,
guys.
honors college.
Yeah, sorry guys. I took it a little deep there.
No, we like the deepness. So Pippin likes the deepness too.
Yeah.
Hey, go lay down, bub.
Pippin is an infinite well of knowledge.
We'll go with that. Well, so we talked earlier before we started recording about just how work has been going,
Yeah.
and you mentioned that things have been going really well lately, which I'm so happy for you guys.
Thank you. Yeah.
We're both located in Indianapolis. Our businesses are located in
Yeah.
Indianapolis, but I know my client base expands past that, and I'm sure yours does as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what's it like for you? What's it like for you? Number one, working in Indianapolis, and how often do you find yourself working for clients or outside of Indiana or in the greater Midwest?
Pretty often, I'd say. Yeah, like we do a lot of post-production work. We do a lot of animation. Indianapolis is such an interesting city. It's like so small. It's like big, but it's also so small. And like you get up into the top, circles, and you're like, gosh, everybody knows everybody else. And that can feel a little bit constraining, but it's also kind of like comforting because you're like, once you get in upper circles, it's like it's really easy to get recommendations from people, which is nice. But no, I mean, we work with people all over the country, especially, like doing the post-production stuff. We don't do as much like travel shooting. That's just not something that we've specialized in. But most of our, connections across the country have come from Indiana, though. It's always been like somebody who like knew somebody at who was working remotely at a company in Indiana, then recommended us to somebody who worked at a company in New Jersey, something like that, basically.
You mentioned speaking to students at Luddy. So have you just like gone back and spoken as a?
No, I have a friend who works at Luddy, and he was just like, oh, there's a panel for incoming freshmen, and do you want to be on the panel? And I was like, sure, I'll go. And it was, I don't know, it was just nice. They're like, what would you tell, yourself when you're a freshman? I'm like, start networking now. Like, don't wait until your senior year.
I've gone back and I've spoken in a couple of freshman classes at Ball State, and then also at what was IUPUI.
No longer, yeah.
I'm not sure which school it falls under now. I'm guessing IU. Their film department. But I know I told the students the same thing. Is like, as cliche as it sounds, get to know the person sitting next to you. Like, I know that sounds so cliche. It's the same thing you hear from everyone, but there's a reason for that. You do not know. I mean, like you were just saying, for us, you never know when one client might have a recommendation for what could become another client for you. How that passes along. I started getting my first few clients because I made, as the term is, made the ask. Can you introduce me to this person? And that has snowballed into a number of clients. And it's the same way with trying to find jobs. If you're like an individual position freelancer, is you may be out of work, but your buddy is working on something. They need somebody. You fill that role. You have an in. It's just like you said. The industry as a whole, but like in Indianapolis specifically, it's a pretty big city. It's a small industry. Small. Not necessarily like in the work available, but like in regards to everyone knows everyone.
I don't know how true this is, but one thing I've heard about the Indianapolis market is that the prices for individual shooters are actually comparable or higher than sometimes in LA, because there's so much more competition in LA for like an assistant, camera op or something than there is in Indy. And so like it's a smaller kind of coterie of people who are able to do it.
I have had that situation where someone has reached out and be like, we weren't expecting these prices. And it's like, well, our work is comparable. And I think that's the oddity. And I'm curious if you maybe had this experience. Whenever I meet someone and they find out what I do, and somehow the topic always comes back around to the pandemic. And they ask, well, how did you do through the pandemic? I have the oddity of saying the pandemic helped my business because you had all of these large corporations that couldn't send their in-house crews out like they used to. So they had to hire local. And they started to see, Indiana has top-tier talent. We just haven't looked for it. Did you experience any of that? Like I know, like you said, like that was probably during the period before you were
super duper pursuing it. Pandemic was interesting. I don't know if I'm super equipped to answer that question.
That's not a problem. It just popped in my head because I mean, the industry and like the way that we are perceived being in Indiana is always interesting to me. I mean, I know, like, we have the Indianapolis Film Commission now. We have it is a tax incentive. I would almost call it more a semblance of a tax incentive, just because it's not. I remember I'd have to do the research again on who it falls under, but it's like a separate like outside subcommittee, I think, that oversees the way that those incentives are granted. So the door is open now, obviously for large scale film and TV productions to come into Indiana, which I'm ecstatic about, cautiously, just because it's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah.
I know we just had the dual premiere with Pegasus. That was a big thing, and I think that's a good step in the right direction. So hopefully we see more. But yeah, like that getting people outside of Indiana that live in in LA, in New York, in Chicago, in Atlanta, that aren't familiar with the local industry, the local crews. Yeah. We have that uphill battle of them understanding you don't need to add to your budget to fly in people. Yeah. There are people here that are just as talented, just as qualified. Their geographic location should not exclude them from that work. Yeah. It's just a weird thing that we have to, we're having to balance. Yeah. Speaking of things in the larger markets, this is a fun topic that's ongoing throughout all aspects of the industry. AI.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, AI is an ongoing subject. And I know, like, me personally and my colleagues, we're trying to find ways to ethically utilize AI as a tool, not as a replacement. Yeah. And I think that's the very narrow path we're trying to navigate. Because I think, would you agree that AI is not going away anytime soon?
Oh, of course, it's not going away.
So much money has been poured into developing it and making it something that is functional. In a variety of ways. But obviously, as we've seen through the strikes over the last year, there are bad faith actors that want to utilize it to save money for themselves and fully replace the human aspect. And that's in a variety of positions. That's not just the SAG strikes, though I know those have been that and the writer's strike have been two of the biggest ones. I'm sure we're going to see more coming from other guilds over the as their contracts come up for negotiation. But again, knowing that we're trying to find a way to use it ethically as a tool, not a replacement. How are you seeing AI affecting the animation business or the motion design side of things? With systems like DALL-E, with image generations. I know there are a number of illustrators and also animators that have lost clients because of those.
I'll say this: I'm glad I'm not in storyboarding. Because like I know a lot of people like I've seen on LinkedIn who are like out of work storyboarding because like that is something that AI is really good at, like kind of putting out rapid prototypes of like a bunch of different options that then can be used to like create mood boards and storyboards and all that stuff. For us, I feel like right now we're a little protected from it because like we're trying to create like holistic curated looks that then are like animated across like long periods of time, which like I think elements of it are going to be really sped up. Like good example, I remember we did we did some VFX work helping out on like an Acura commercial where they're like, there's a porta potty in the background, and this was like 2 years ago, and so it was like we had to go in, we had to like mask it out, and then we had to create like a thing, and then we had to track the 3D camera, and then we had to like go in and like all of this stuff. And now it's like you just go in and you smart fill it in, and it's like there's an 8-hour day that we don't have to do anymore.
Right. And I think that's that is, to me, that's the ethical approach of using it as a tool. And like for me, so I just rebuilt from the ground up my personal like acting website. And I do all my web management myself. I do it all through Wix. Not sponsored yet. But I've been using Wix since college. And the original website I had on there was made in college. There's a reason it looked the way it did. And Wix has a bunch of really good AI tools now that, in my mind, does not replace a proper web designer. Because having an actual, having an actual proper web designer who can code, who can give you the special aspects, who can make more finite adjustments to fonts or to color hex codes or things like that, you're not going to get that out of a low-priced AI that doesn't already have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of hours spent into training it.
Yeah.
But what it is good at, in my opinion again, is saving time.
Yeah.
Like you were saying,
Yeah.
you just, with the porta potty thing,
Yeah.
which is hilarious.
Yeah.
You saved an 8-hour day
Yeah.
because all you had to do is quick mask, autofill, done.
Yeah. So for certain processes, I think it will drive down the price of like certain services, right? But like, I'd say the most tangible way we've used it, it helps some, with art direction, like especially like initial style ideation. It's a really quick way to prototype like different style ideation, but then you still have to extend it out across like a project. So it hasn't been as like all-encompassingly transformative yet. I mean, honestly, Premiere's new AI audio editor, very nice. Like, have you tried that yet?
So we stopped using Premiere.
Okay.
We made the shift. So we still have the Adobe Suite because there are some clients that, like they have collaborative projects that want to use that. We have some templates we use. Media encoder is the main thing we still keep it for, but we primarily use DaVinci.
Okay. Yeah.
We made the shift a few years ago, but same thing. DaVinci's AI voice isolator.
It's really nice.
It's insane.
It's super helpful.
We did a shoot this past year, not even this past year, like 2 months ago, where we were filming these high school graduations, and one graduation was in Hinkle at Butler. We were doing the interviews in Hinkle, like on the court. Parents and family members and everything, they're all filming, so it's all this noise. And one student had he had a very quiet, very raspy voice because he had he suffered from long COVID. And so it was hard to hear him on site. Throw on that isolator, every single background sound was gone. Every single one, and you could hear him clear as day. It was incredible and also terrifying. Like that is one where like, and this is where I think it is going to be hard for AI to replace like a trained professional. To do it in a way that people would expect for the prices they pay, whether that be a multi-million-dollar film or a multi-million-dollar commercial, whatever it may be. Is the AI does that first pass. It saves you all that time on the initial passes. But then dialing it in, making it so because that wiped out all that background sound, great. Didn't sound natural though. Because you got the weird, like, there's movement going on in the background, so you need to adjust that so that, like, there's stuff happening in the background. The voice sounds a little funky, so you need to adjust it so the voice sounds more natural. That requires someone that knows what they're looking for, what they're listening for in that case. But yeah, I mean, have you seen? I mean, for you personally with Devon House, have you seen any negative or positive? I mean, you mentioned the positive effects with saving you time, but have you seen any of the negative effects yet?
Negative effects of the AI. I mean, there's always like the fear of like, for us, like animated explainer videos is like the two kind of the competitors are like really cheap service-based or overseas animated things, because it's like if you're only coming to animation for price and not relationship, you can find services that will do stuff that's pretty cheap. I don't know how much, like, some of the VFX stuff we did was like probably not going to be as profitable anymore. The thing that like it's made me reprioritize that when we talk to our clients, we always emphasize that what we're doing is giving people like real authentic interactions with real people. And it's like, you're always going to need like a technician to capture that. And so focusing on the authenticity is going to like, with like where everything's going with like Sora and like the other stuff, it's like eventually maybe someday will come where you really cannot tell what's real and what's fake. But I feel like for now, and for a while, you're still gonna always be able to tell when something's just a little bit off. And people will start like filtering by like, I don't like fake, I like real. And so you actually want a little more flaw. You want a little real because you're like, well, at least I knew that like a real person did this.
Because if it's too perfect, you're hitting the uncanny valley. Which just makes you go, I don't trust this because it makes me uncomfortable.
So, but we'll see. it's hard to tell, you know. It's like one of my big goals being a business owner is like I want to learn the skills, like the soft skills and like the life skills that like if AI came and totally replaced my job in 3 years, I'd be able to go like, you know, kill it in some other industry,
Right.
basically. Because it's like it could, you know, could be like what was that thing I heard? It was like, you know, the biggest industry in 1903 was like whaling or something, and then like overnight it was just like gone because of electricity, you know, something like that. But
that's true. Like we said, AI is not going anywhere anytime soon. And I think it's navigating how to use it ethically. So that we still maintain, you know, the positions and livelihoods of the people in the industry, while still realizing this is a new technology that's not going anywhere. How do we use it to our own benefit to then better the work that we do? Along that vein, when you are approached by a client for a project, you know, you talked about how you spend a lot of time communicating with clients and networking and giving that human aspect. I mean, what is your creative process like when you are, you know, let's look more at the motion design and the animation. I know you guys do also offer the filming portion, but from the animation or the motion design side, like what is your creative process like?
Yeah, so we go from like discovery to concepts to boards to style to animatic to animation, basically. And so like a lot of times discovery, and it's like there can be other, you know, kind of tertiary steps in there of like if we help out a lot with scripting, you know, we have to get voiceover approved, you have to get like music chosen. But generally speaking, when we send somebody a proposal, if it's not like a fully fledged RFP, we usually send different tiers of animation with a bunch of samples of animations that are like concomitant with the cost per minute, basically. And then usually like after that, we use that as a jumping off point of like, are any of these styles that like speak to you? And then after that, we'll send a concept pitch where we'll be like, okay, this script about, you know, 4 years on campus. Do you want it to be from like first person? Do you want it to be like the following 3 students? Do you want it to be this? And then we use that to like start developing like a style that then we get approved by the client.
I want to touch on something you mentioned real quick because I know this kind of surprised someone I was speaking to who's not familiar with, I mean, with the production side of things in general, but in particular animation. I think I mentioned, so I'd mentioned working with you because I've worked with you in the past. Love your guys' work. You guys are awesome. That the price is based on the, and correct me if I'm wrong, but for what I remember from the project we worked on, the price is based on the per minute of completed animation. How, let's just say for 60 seconds, on average, how much time does it take you, or, you know, or if it's Taylor, is that what you said the name of the?
Taylor.
So you or Taylor or whoever's animating it, on average, how long would it take you to do a 60-second animation? Just to like to give that perspective.
Man, it really depends on the style. So the two factors that define like scope for an animated project are the length of the video and the style chosen. So, I mean, yeah, just like talking numbers, it's like we can have styles that are like, you know, $3,000, $4,000 a minute, all the way up to styles that are like 15 to 20 grand a minute, basically. And so that's like, there's just a massive difference between how much time that takes.
I mean, because again, correct me if I'm wrong, you're not working with like, you know, cell by cell.
No,
you're not doing like cell by cell.
It's vector. Yeah, it's vector. A lot of the more complex styles would be what we called like vector character animation, where you create characters that then you create like rudimentary rigs, and so they're still two-dimensional, but and they're made vector, so they're like infinitely scalable. But they have like, you know, skeletons, and they may have different faces. You might do lip sync with them. Man, how much time does it take to do an animation?
Well, let me ask you this, if you can remember. So for the for the FC Tucker animation that we did, that one involved I think that was 30 seconds. You know, it was the rotating globe that started from a single T that then popped up all the other little markers, and then that grew into just filling the entire state, rotating globe to the Tucker logo?
I think with revisions, that was probably, I would guess 15 to 20 hours.
Nah, I believe that.
Probably.
And that's just for 30 seconds. Just to give people who may not be familiar with that perspective.
And that was also like using some tricks, basically, because it's like you already had some of the assets and
yeah, we already had the assets from them, and I think you mentioned you had done a similar animation
that I was able
recently.
to reutilize some transitionary elements to inform some of the animation on it. Yeah.
Right. So just to give people that perspective, like a 30-second piece does not take 30 seconds to make.
It's we definitely get the response of like either, I mean, I feel like it's a 50-50 chance whether people are like, oh, it's a really reasonable prices, or like it costs that much for animation. Because a lot of times people will come to us thinking the animation is cheaper than on-set production, and it can be, because on-set production, depending on the type of shoot, like on-set has so many fixed costs. And animation is like basically infinitely scalable. So you can get some pretty economic stuff. Like if you're like willing to set your expectations as far as like what type of video you're going to get. I mean, that's one thing that we've learned is the more prescriptive we can be for our clients, the more, confident they feel and like more safe and secure they feel in our process.
Well, and that's the human aspect that you were talking about, right?
Yeah.
Like you give them that personal relationship, that personal communication of, let me hear what it is you want. Verify that this is the emotion, this is the personality you want in this piece, and actually give you that piece.
Yeah. I think the thing maybe that's a little different too about animation is like in an animated project, let's say that it's like a 10-week long project to get it done, probably 6 or 7 weeks of the 10 weeks is all just making sure that they are excited about the concept and doing like the storyboard, the animatic, getting the voiceover recorded, getting some like style samples approved. And then the actual animation might only be like 3 weeks of like actual production time. So it's like, we want to make sure like when we bring all our force to bear on the actual production of it, that everybody's happy with it. As opposed to sometimes you can go on a shoot and you can be like, oh, we'll get it there and we'll kind of figure out some stuff, and that's not ideal, right? But like sometimes you can make that happen. Whereas animation, it's like, no, you don't want us wasting 70 hours on this unless you're going to be happy with the end product, because it's like you can't get that. It's like you can't get it back, basically.
Right, exactly.
So it's a lot of like ready, aim, fire, basically.
Lots of pre-production.
Yes, yep.
Which, I mean, makes sense. You never want to hear the words, we'll fix it in post.
Yes, yeah.
Because for you, that's not really a thing.
We're basically all doing post.
Right.
Like we are just 100% post.
You don't go from pre-production to production to post. You go from pre-production to post. Yeah. Post is your production. There is no in between. Yeah. You fix it now, or it's going to be a long repair.
Yeah, definitely.
Which, I mean, that makes so much sense. So I think you've kind of addressed this, but like, so when you're dealing with that, like you said, if you have a 10-week project, you might spend 7 of it in that pre-production, dialing in the concept and the emotions and music and so on and so forth. Yeah. What kind of things do you try and address with clients early on to avoid any conflicts or pain points while you're working, like when you're in that 10-week process?
Yeah, one of the biggest things is that we try to lay out a roadmap of approvals that we're going to get from them, and like when they can give feedback and like what they can expect. So we have these kind of like maybe, I don't know, gates or milestones where it's like, hey, once this is approved, we're ordering the voiceover, and it's like, you get this many revisions on the voiceover before it's done. And it's like the big thing, like the final meeting we always have with our client before we like dive into production is the final animatic approval. So like, we go all the way from, like I said, the proposal to concepts to then we'll have like a script, and then we'll do a storyboard, and we'll get the voiceover and the music chosen, and then we'll get the style approved where they get to see the final cards. And then we'll do the animatic, which is the storyboard with like rudimentary transitions put in with the voiceover and the music. And they'll watch, and it's in a video format. It's no longer in like a PDF. Yeah. And like once that's approved, that's when we're like, hey, we are going into animation. So like you are happy with everything in the animatic.
Depending on what that animation is, like, so because I'm unfamiliar with that.
Yeah.
My understanding of animation is very, very, very rudimentary.
Sure.
I tried to learn animation for all of a week once. I gave up because it did not make sense to me.
Sure.
Did not process in my brain. When you have that animatic, so are you talking like wireframe models?
No, so we don't do much 3D. Ours is all 2D. So an animatic would be kind of like a storyboard that is maybe one step above a storyboard, and then put into like Premiere or DaVinci with some rudimentary transitions and the music and stuff.
Okay.
So
it's not fully moving yet. It's more so here's the video format with maybe a still
like frame, and maybe there might be like a frame in between these two frames that show how they're going to transition between each other.
Gotcha. They're placeholders.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
To understand like there is proper animation like here, like we've discussed over the last 7 weeks.
It's like a glorified storyboard.
Gotcha. Okay.
A glorified storyboard.
Gotcha.
And one of the big changes we made recently is we started doing all of our animatics in color now too, so that we actually get to make the color decisions in the storyboarding process as opposed to the asset creation.
Yeah.
And that's been really helpful with like getting clients excited about projects and stuff. And we've been like, as we've, I'd say, scaled up, or we've been getting like better clients, we've like been the pre-production time has just been growing. The actual animation time hasn't necessarily been growing as much. It's just like the amount of planning has been expanding.
Right, which makes sense because then the more planning you do, the quicker the actual execution is.
Yep. Yeah. Because when it's planned well, you can also scale to do it. Like if you have like a rotary of subcontractors and the process, you can like out and then everybody's like working on it.
It's kind of similar how like for me on some of our larger projects, I try and do, whether I'm reaching out to someone kind of maybe not cold calling perspectively or necessarily, but if I'm reaching out to someone or I'm already in talks and like they want to work on a project, I put together a creative deck, which is like, this is the project, this is the summary of like what is the point of the project, what are the deliverables, including what are the fonts, what all the various creative aspects that we need to keep in mind from like a brand Bible standpoint. But then it has, are we doing interviews? How many interviews? Who are the people? What is the arc of the piece? So I still try and keep it in like a 3-act structure. So like this first act is about, how did this company, if it's a brand story, let's say, how did this company come to be? What is the mission? Go into the middle portion where typically there's like a testimonial. Why do people like this company? Why should other people like this company? The way I started describing it, because we started offering longer brand stories, which are like anywhere from like 5 to 10 minutes, and then shorter profile pieces, which are like 2 to 4 minutes. And my approach to the differentiation, and maybe this is similar to how you approach certain aspects or certain projects, is the profile piece tells me why I should patronize or why I should shop this company. The brand story tells you why you should care about the company. It just adds that additional level of depth and sort of creates an initial relationship between audience and company. Because it can focus on the people. It can focus on the people. It can focus on specific projects or initiatives they're doing. Whatever it may be. I mean, is that similar, like how sometimes that like various projects for you on the animation or motion design side work?
I'd say motion design, most of the time we recommend people keep it under 3 minutes, just because it's like,
that's fair.
With like bang for the buck, it's like man, that's the thing. That's one of those kind of differences between like live action and like animation, is that it's like editing. Editing for a 10-minute piece, like completing a 10-minute piece with animation, it's like 10. It's not exactly, but it's like 10 times the cost of a 1-minute video. Right.
If it's all animation.
Yeah. If it's 100% animated. Right. Whereas like a live action piece, there's so many efficiencies that you can get, and it's like, you can get a 10-minute piece shot in, I don't know, 2 days or whatever, or 3 days. But it's like, and it's like
for those longer brand stories, we typically recommend 2 days.
Yeah, so it's
because you can spend more time on day one, do the interviews.
But if it's a 2-minute video and a 10-minute video, it's like you don't need 5 days instead of one, right? Like so it's like so we don't experience that as much. Where like I mean, that's something we're trying to grow in. Is like is be more prescriptive and confident in like our expertise in what we do,
Right.
and be like, hey, no, you know, you may think you want it this way, but no, this is going to be more effective for you. And more often than not, that just represents like the biggest way we can do that is make sure that the script is compelling, and that like we understand where the video is sitting in their like marketing plan.
Right. Well, and again, as you were saying, that goes back to the relationship
Yeah.
building. And AI is not going to build that relationship to understand, as we were just differentiating, why should people care about this product or company or initiative. Yeah. Well, let me try and get us to wrap up, because I know I appreciate all the time that you've given today. So in discussing the process for animation and motion design, what can clients do to help make your life easier? You know, what can they do when coming to meet you with a project idea? What can make things easier for you?
Have a clear and concise marketing goal for what they're doing, because it's like we can bring our creativity to bear on what they're doing, but if we are trying to do that within without a sense of what the actual purpose is or the desired outcome, that makes it a lot more difficult for us. Definitely, like if you see a video that you like, having that like that we can use to reference. But no, like that's one of the things we're trying to do is if somebody knows they have the need for an animated video, we're trying to make the process as simple for them to be like, hey, you get on our conveyor belt, and we're going to make sure that you are happy the whole entire way, and by the end you have a really awesome video. So, you know, it's as simple as like just having clear marketing incentives, knowing how we're going to fit within your marketing pipeline, or like, you know, your marketing yearly plan. You know, yeah, I think I wouldn't say we've ever had failures necessarily, but like sometimes we work with people where it's like, we probably could have been more prescriptive, but they didn't, you know, they knew they wanted something, and they just worked with us, and we were like, yeah, what's this actually for though? And then we do it, and we're like, I think if we would have helped guide them, you know, that's what we're working towards, being able to guide them towards the most like effective outcome for the video they want. But no, that's our whole thing, is we want to make it easy, seamless, and you know, that's one thing I love about animation compared to like, you know, I started like when we were doing freelance and stuff, I did some like graphic design and stuff. And man, graphic design is tough because everybody is so opinionated because they think they can do it. And, you know, animation, everybody is like, I have no idea how you're doing it. So they give you a little bit of leeway to be like, I don't know how you did that. That's like, it's kind of like magic. It's like how I feel about like programmers, where I'm like, I have no idea, like, you could say this costs $500 million, and I would not know because I have no concept of how long it takes you to do.
It's like, I trust you.
Yeah.
I tried coding for all of a day.
Yeah.
I tried the sample thing. I literally copied and pasted the code. It still didn't work.
Oh no.
So to all the coders out there, God bless you.
Yeah.
And you're not being paid enough.
I don't know, man. I think depends. I think you're paid a lot. Yeah.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah. Well, listen. So we're getting to the end of this. Again, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time today.
Yeah.
I'm wrapping up all these episodes by asking just a few real quick rapid fire questions. So I know we've really delved into a number of topics.
Yeah.
I know there's some we've talked about that you and I could sit and just go at for ages.
Yeah.
But for these, just real quick rapid fire, first thing that comes to your mind. So what's your biggest inspiration?
Oh my goodness.
And I can narrow this down in the media industry.
My biggest inspiration, I would say one of my biggest is Mobius, the French comic artist.
Okay, yeah. Did he do the art for Sandman comics?
No, Mobius is the name of the Sandman, I believe.
Morbius. Right.
Wait.
Morpheus.
Yes, yeah.
We were getting there.
Sorry, Mobius was in the 80s, a French comic artist who did, his style was like very influential in what's a movie that like has very like Alien.
Okay.
Very
That's
Mobius,
what I was thinking.
very Mobius inspired, like the sci-fi and technology and stuff. And when I first read him, I just loved it. It affected my art style immediately.
Gotcha.
So yeah.
Gotcha. What's your favorite project or production memory?
Probably when this was about man, probably, I don't know, maybe a year and a half ago, we got a really big opportunity to work with a client, but it was really stressful and it was really last minute. And we ended up putting in, between the three of us, on top of everything else we were doing, we put in 350 hours of work in 3 weeks.
Okay.
And it's basic, that project that we did, it ended up lasting for like 6 months. And it was like, well, no, like once we had finished that first month, and that was what gave us the capital we needed to hire Taylor on when we did.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it was like that was like huge, instrumental in like our growth. And but coming together and bringing our it was like an incredibly unifying experience to all be like in the office like day after day being like, how can we get this done? We've got like 21 days to do it. We're managing the client's expectations.
Yeah.
And it was like we did like 12 minutes of animation in like 3 weeks. It was crazy. It was like, it was bonkers, but that's a really one of my favorites.
Awesome. You already kind of touched on this, but what's your dream project?
Oh man. Well, so yeah, comic could be one, but I would love to make a like Midwestern themed Tarantino-esque movie.
Okay.
But like not like trying to be Tarantino, but like a movie where chaos is consistently happening. It's funny, but it's incredibly logical and mechanical.
Yeah.
Like I love, in the scripts that I have written, I love writing scripts that are like, basically imagine like a ball starting an avalanche, but like attached to the ball are those little sticky hands that you would hit on the window. And each time the hand hits, it latches onto something and then it will orbit and it will come back later.
Yeah.
So literally everything that's happening is constantly coming back around. And so you're constantly making connections, but the chaos is just getting like crazier and crazier. But it has this like beautiful, logical consistency to it.
Yeah.
I would love to make a movie like that.
Oh, I love the concept of that. Honestly, but it sounds like you should just make a movie about like a Midwestern production company.
Yeah, there you go.
Like that's what you need. Yeah. What is your biggest production pet peeve?
My biggest production pet peeve is it's a problem I have, which is I have a really hard time telling clients no. And I need to get better at that. I need to get a lot better at telling, like, my initial response is always to be like apologetic and like want to please.
Yeah.
And oftentimes I think that's going to help, but actually I think in the same way that like when you have a child, being strong, even strict at times actually makes them feel safer and happier. I think clients are that way too. Gotcha. And so that's the biggest pet peeve. A more fun pet peeve would be, when clients don't understand what the animatic is, even though we've told them 15 times, and they're like, why is the animation the animation isn't very smooth? And we're like, it's the animatic. We told you.
Oh, Lord.
I sent you like 10 emails about it.
Oh, yeah. And last question. What advice do you have for aspiring media professionals?
It's all relationships. And explicitly, I know like it's super cliche to say it's all relationships, but figure out a way in which you can gamify and systematize building relationships with people and do it on a consistent basis. Because what I've seen is that building your hard skills gives you linear results, and building your soft skills gives you exponential results. So just like prioritize it, find any way that you can consistently make connections with people and develop relationships, and always prioritize trust and relationships over everything else. That's it.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, Patrick, thank you again so much for joining me this week. Where can the people find you?
So yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, Patrick Rieth. We have an Instagram and a Facebook, and we have a website, devonhousecreative.com. You can find us on 46 and Keystone in Indianapolis. Yeah, maybe you might see me on the Monon, but yeah.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much, Patrick. And thank you, all of you, for joining us on another episode of Filmmakers Blend podcast. We'll be back again next month with more information on the industry and another fascinating individual from our industry as well. Thank you again, Patrick Rieth. And yeah.